welcome to episode 30 of Backpacks and Stories. I'm here today with Alain.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. Just a brief introduction. My name is Alain. I am from Colombia, Barranquilla. I came here into Canada as a student, and then eventually moved on to work, and I became a resident after a little bit over 3 years being here, and now I'm just making my life here.
Nice. What brought you here in the first place?
I wanted to have a bit of a culture shock. I knew that I wanted to go outside of Colombia to to experience and have any form of adventure, and also to grow myself. But I didn't want to be in a place that was comfortable for me, let's say like another Latin American country, another Spanish speaking country, or Spain, you know. So I decided that Canada was a good, they have a good quality of life here. I like Montreal because it was a French speaking province, and I felt like, why not, I can also try and learn French in the meantime. So it felt like the perfect place for me to get that culture shock, and at the same time make the most out of the experience.
Yeah.
And what about you? What brought you here to Montreal?
To Montreal, I knew a few people here before, and I had my work visa already, so I just decided, similarly, I wanted a challenge. I wanted the whole like, oh, I can learn French here.
How's that going?
Just like you described, but I never went in the course, so no, I feel like as a kid I always rejected the idea of French, and I thought, okay, this is my time as an adult.
It's like a very British thing now.
Yeah, I mean, for us it's languages in general, but I think especially with the French there's some kind of animosity with the history that we share between each other. But yeah, I thought I can maybe do the mature thing as an adult, use this as an opportunity to learn another language, and yeah, no.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about it off camera, but it's hard because you are, well, as an immigrant, you face a lot of challenges when you start your life here. And I feel like one of the biggest ones for me was having to do too many things at once. I came here to study. At the same time, you're a student. You have to work part-time to sustain yourself. Especially because usually the countries where we come from, in Latin America, in Asia or Africa, wherever, our currency is so much, it's weaker than here. So things cost more. So we cannot just use our savings. It's not practical, so you obviously have to maybe get a part-time job here that will help you pay the rent and just get enough money to survive until you get the degree or whatever you came to do here.
Survive being the key word.
Exactly, it's all about surviving. And so I tried to do too many things at once at the beginning. I was studying at night, then during the weekdays I was doing the French course, the first French class that the provincial government they offer to the people that come, and then on the weekend I was working, so I had no days off. It was Monday to Friday just studying, and then Saturday, Sunday some work, and I ended up just burning myself out. I was completely done with French, done with my class after 3 months, and I was like, no, okay, I have to drop French or I'm not gonna make it.
How long did that last?
I did the class for 3 months, and it did help at first, and I was very motivated when I just arrived here, but then it just became like no, I almost started hating the language. In a sense, also because there's provincial laws here, and when they try to force you to learn something, or like you have to learn to integrate, then you kind of get an animosity towards it instead of like a welcoming feeling. And at the end, I let go of French for a while, and now that I'm okay, I'm already working. I'm settling down. I'm a resident now. I decided to go back into it, go back into French, and let's see where it goes.
Have you started the course again?
No, no, because now I have a like a stronger base.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now I'm trying to practice it, like with people or just watching movies. The thing is, like we were talking about that too. The fact that you need to like the language and like the culture and everything. And I don't know if I like French culture. I don't like much of the
Quebec culture.
Yeah, I mean, the Quebec people are very nice. I feel like my grudge is more towards the languages. Sometimes it feels a bit elitist, you know, in the sense that you have to pronounce it perfectly, and sometimes people, it doesn't seem very encouraging at first. Here in Quebec, there's a challenge that most of the people in Montreal, they speak English. So if you're not making much sense in French, they just default into English.
Does that happen to you a lot?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So I usually make it like 2 minutes into the conversation. I don't remember how to say something, and they're like, they start speaking in English and they speak in English.
That rarely happens to me.
Hey, really?
Yeah, people
This could go.
continue to speak in French even when I'm like, sorry.
Oh wow.
Normally, sometimes they change, but sometimes they just don't pick up and they just keep speaking in French. Maybe it's for the face.
Yeah, I don't know if that speaks also about my level.
I don't know. I imagine my level is a lot worse than yours, but
Yeah, I mean it's ever it doesn't end. Like, you know, learning a language, you just keep going. And I'm much better than I was, let's say, 2 years ago. I can tell you that. So it's definitely moving on the right way, but it's still needs work.
how did you get your residency without speaking French? Because I thought that was a requirement.
Yeah, I had to do it through the federal
Okay.
government, because you have two options here. You have either you can do it as a provincial nominee, where the province has its own program on the immigrants that they need, that they require. You can do it through them, and usually when you have French, it's very easy, because that's sometimes it's not everywhere that you can find people that speak French, and you want like a wider pool of people, you know. So definitely the Quebec government is like, we don't even need you to be that good in French. Like B1 is enough. Now they're making it higher, but when I came, it was definitely easy to do it through the French route. But the problem is that I didn't have much time. My work permit only lasted a year and a half, and I had that time to do my residence.
That was your graduation visa?
Yeah, exactly. Like when you graduate, they give you a postgraduate work permit, and with that you can work yourself into your PR. And what I did was, I had the option of the provincial, but the provincial in Quebec, they require two years minimum.
Okay.
So it was
And the French.
And the French, exactly. Maybe that's why I didn't take too much. I didn't practice that much French during my time studying, because I knew that I was going to do it through the federal government. I didn't even know if I was going to stay in Montreal for good. I had to obviously move to another province if I wanted to do it through the federal. But once you have the PR, you can. If you don't like it, let's say I go to Ontario, I stay there, and I'm like, no, I don't like this here. I'll have my PR. I can just go to Quebec.
Is that what you did?
Basically, yes.
Okay. Did you go to Toronto, or you were in Ottawa, or a different city?
It's just a small place in Ontario, just for a few months. Also, my work allowed me to work from there, so it was not really a problem. But definitely, Montreal won me over, big time. So I just moved back.
What is it that you like so much about the city?
I feel like it's the multicultural aspect. I feel most Canadian cities have that, but the big cities. But Montreal has something with the French language and the history, that also the fact that it's a very I would say, bohemian city, like very into the arts. It's just the way it was put together.
Mm-hmm.
It gives you this sensation that you can explore cultures. You go to very specific neighborhoods, and you shift from like a French kind of architecture to a more traditional like Victorian English kind of.
Yeah, yeah,
And when I went to Ontario, I didn't see that. So it was easy for me to complain about Montreal when all I knew was Montreal. I was like, there's gotta be something better. And then I went to Ontario, and I was like, no, it was not that bad there in Montreal. And I felt like with the friends, with the people you meet, you definitely, without noticing, you make a family here. You make a home. You build your nest, and maybe unconsciously you become attached to the city. So that's what happened to me, and I had to come back.
yeah. And here you are.
And here I am.
And for the foreseeable future, here you will be.
Yes, that's for sure.
Do you have any? I know we talked a little bit about this the other day, but you have. One day you want to leave. One day you want to try something new, right?
Yes. Near future, I'm definitely wanting to stay here. I'm comfortable with my job. I'm comfortable with the way things are going, but I would love to explore more. Of course, I would like to see what else is around the world, because now I know that it was a very positive experience for me to leave Colombia to see what else was out there, and now I would like to see more of that.
Mm-hmm.
Also because one thing that Canada gave me is exposure to all cultures.
Yeah,
You know, I have friends from North Africa, from other parts of Latin America, from Asia, and definitely I'm interested in to maybe visit friends that they were here in Montreal, now they're back in their countries, and who knows? But for the near future is Montreal. It's my place is here for the time being.
Who were which were the people from the cultures who surprised you the most?
Usually were people whose countries I didn't have that much on my mind.
Yeah.
You know, I met people from Ethiopia, from Southeast Asia, like from the Philippines and from Vietnam. Very nice people from North Africa, Morocco, these kinds of places, and it's just I mean I could name them all because it's very it's just the countries that you only think about, like a handful, like 30 countries that always pops in everyone's minds. But my biggest surprises were with the countries that were like so in the middle of nowhere, very small countries like Burundi in Africa, something like that. And you get to meet the people, you get to meet the culture and even the cuisine. I love also trying new stuff when it comes to food, and you get a sense of I'm kind of visiting their home place. Without actually living in Canada, so that was another thing.
Yeah, I think that's something that I really liked about. I don't know how much I feel that here, because I think the majority of my friends are mostly Latinos. I mean, I have some other friends from different places, but generally I think now I search out the Latin community, and that's important to me now. But it's something that I felt in Australia. Like in Australia, everything was, meeting people you met people from all walks of life with different stories, and kind of being able to travel around the world without actually living in a country.
Well, you're a more seasoned traveler than me for sure. And I wanted to ask you, what was your experience, like the first time you went to Latin America and lived there? What was your your biggest surprises, the things that you like the most about.
Well, I mean, living in one place, I would have to say that was in Colombia really because I stayed there for like 4 months.
Mhm.
But like before having stayed in Chile and Argentina for like 6 weeks, 2 months at a time, but moving around, um, yeah, I mean, it was a big shock. I remember the night that my friend picked me up from the airport, and we were driving into his neighborhood, and like seeing the people who go out into the street whilst the traffic lights are red, and like doing shows, trying to get tips. Like that was, I was like, wow, I'm in a new world. You know, I remember crossing the over the Andes in the plane, thinking this is so beautiful. Like, and I hadn't even landed yet, and then just one thing after another, just surprise after surprise after surprise. Being around his family who didn't speak any English, it's like wow, I've never really been this in deep before in a place that like no one speaks English. You know, because usually wherever you go, there's always someone who speaks English, but his family no, and just knowing like wow, these people all around me are from like they've grown up in a completely different way to me, you know. Because in Europe is one thing, like we're different, but we kind of grew up in a similar way.
Mm.
But in Latin America, no, it's another world. It really is another world.
That's true. I mean, it also like talking to the people that visit Latin America or live in Latin America now they come from somewhere else. It kind of makes you see what you sometimes take for granted, like the little stuff that just make you laugh sometimes. Like I met a French guy that was teaching French and languages in Barranquilla where I'm from,
Hmm.
and he said that he felt really comfortable in Colombia. He never wanted to leave because even the little stuff like on Sundays there's a guy that walks around the whole city. There's just guys that go around the whole city
Yeah.
selling like fruits or avocado and stuff like that. And there's like he said like waking up like at 8 a.m. and hearing the avocate like at the bottom of the street. He was like, "Ah, I feel this is great.
Yeah.
It feels warm. It feels something." And I was like, "Wow, I never thought about it that way." And I love that guy. I love the avocado guy. So that's true.
Fuck, I wish someone would bring
Yeah,
avocado to my door now.
and they always arrive there like for that same day, and I
And
was
cheap.
like, and cheap too, and I'm like, yeah, why did I even leave?
What are some other things that you can think of that now you realize that you took for granted?
I guess the nature.
Mhm.
I started to well being from a place that is so close to the ocean, the Caribbean. I realized that um, my body feels comfortable somewhere near the ocean,
Mhm.
and I've learned like going from one place to another. Like I went to the Pacific once. I went to Chile,
Mhm.
and it was so different to what the vibe it gave me from the Caribbean Sea.
Mhm.
It looked the water was deep blue, like it was insanely dark, and I was like,
Yeah.
wow, that looks very different. When I went there, and this was the first time I realized that, wait, so do you mean that the water on the beaches is not always warm? Because in Chile, the part where I was, also the season where I was, it was not, it was cold.
Yeah.
And that was a shock to me because you're in Colombia, you know that we don't have seasons. It's just like very
Yeah.
similar during the whole year. And I noticed that the little stuff like the type of trees, the type of the green scenery. Colombia is a very green country.
Mhm.
In Chile, I was in the north. I was in the desert, the Atacama Desert,
Mhm.
and it's very beautiful. It's very like it feels like it's too much to take in.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful scene, but you miss a certain type of environment,
Mhm.
and I definitely took for granted like the fruits, the nature, the birds, this little stuff that puts you at ease, that like really take you out of your day to day. And sometimes I don't have that in Canada. I feel like I need that recharge, of maybe going visiting my family and seeing them. So I
tropics.
exactly. So I definitely cannot stay away too long. Yeah.
And when was the last time you were there?
December. December. December in Colombia is great. It's not cold. Just there's salsa playing everywhere, and family members, they each bring food. It's the best place to
It's
visit.
party season.
And yes, also in Barranquilla we have the Carnaval.
But that's in February, no?
Yeah, so that whole period where it's basically the worst in the north, like the whole winter, there it's the coolest season, like in the sense that it's not as hot in the Caribbean.
Not as hot.
Not as hot because you know it is pretty hot. In July, June, like you're dying. You have to have like a fan constantly next to you.
When I arrived in Cartagena in the start of December, I was already like that. It was like 32 degrees every day.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's like a local for me. In contrast, because also there's is the wind season. There's also like a very strong breeze.
How hot does it get in like June, July in Barranquilla?
Like the heights, it gets to 40. Like it can get very close to 40.
I'm very humid.
But that's the problem. Yes, definitely. Like in other parts, I've talked to people from the Middle East, let's say, certain parts of these regions that gets like to 50, something like that. But the thing with the Caribbean is that it's very humid. So it's very hard to like it does. It's not just staying in the shade, because sometimes if you're in the shade, you're okay.
Yeah.
But in the Caribbean, you have to have like help, a fan, AC. You know, otherwise you're just sweating there, just sitting there. You're sweating.
Yeah, and when you want to go in the water's warm.
Yeah, that's why it's so nice to go into the ocean when you're like that. You're hot, you're sweating. You go to the ocean and everything's better. So I miss that. I miss that.
Yeah, man. Yeah. There's lots of small things about Colombia and Latin America in general that's just really makes you think like Canada is missing a lot.
Yeah, I feel like immigrants bring a lot to Canada. I feel like it wouldn't be as fun if you didn't have the melting pot of people.
100%.
And I actually I listened to one of your episodes with I think it was a Mexican guy. I think it was called Penelope.
Yeah.
And I think you were talking about something that rang true for me too, about the how people are perceived in Latin America when it comes to like skin tones.
Yeah.
Yeah, that thing where that you said about improving the race, like, yeah, like mejorar la raza in Spanish. That was like, oh my god, they say that in Mexico too. I didn't know. That was like a Colombian thing that I've heard before.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, they have the if you wanna let's get married or something, your parents or your family maybe say like, try to get like a person that is light skinned so they don't get like darker, because
It's crazy.
yeah, it's insane. And to this day some people say that in Colombia like there's no racism, like, oh no, we love each other, it doesn't matter the skin tone, like we know that we're like this.
Yeah, it's easy
But-
for the white guys to say.
Yeah. But it's not really the case, because you have these kinds of stuff, and
Yeah.
I remind people like that's extremely racist, and that's something that our parents have said, like, or maybe not my parents specifically, but some family members, and there's actually a reason why we have that, and it's, I don't know if you know the history or how it's different, the colonization from Latin America with the Spanish and with the English in North America, but I think the main difference is that the well, I feel like they both wanted to get rid of the native population, but uh, the solution for the on the in the north was kind of like, let's just kill them all, you know, start pushing them out of the boundaries, out of the boundary until
Mhm.
there's no land left for them. But in Spain had a different, and I think Portugal too, because if I'm not mistaken, I've heard this term. This term was originated in Portuguese. It was called branqueamento and in Portuguese, but it's the same
The
in Spanish.
whitening.
Whitening, yeah, like blanqueamiento. So basically, what it means is that they wanted to assimilate the population. They said that, okay, you take like indigenous people from Latin America, from the continent, and then you have uh, they have children with a European person.
Yeah.
They would be a bit like a mix of both. But if that child then grows up to also be married to a European and also have another child, then eventually we will remove the indigenous
Yeah.
gene until they get progressively more European and this.
But I don't think that was the case in all of Latin America.
Definitely not. Definitely not. It's like it was like a collective mind kind of idea because
What were because there were two. I remember we had a mini history lesson in Colombia, but I don't remember. It was like there were two. No, I don't know what I'm trying to describe, but it was like what you were talking about, and there were two words for like the two groups of people.
oh yeah, no, I think there were three main groups, and this is like I'm going back to school, like primary.
I'm putting you on the spot here.
Yeah, but I remember there were three. I'm pretty sure there must have been more, all things considered. But in Colombia, and a good part of the Virreinato de Nueva Granada, which was how the Spanish called uh, the place they had colonizing the Americas.
Yeah.
They they had like three combinations of people. You had the white Europeans or the Spanish. You had uh, the indigenous people from Colombia, and you had also African slaves from the West Africa. So you have these three groups of people. So you also are gonna have certain mixes. You know, you have the indigenous with the white from Europe. You have the indigenous with the black African, and you have the black African with the white one. So they came up with terms like, let me see, the indigenous with the European was called mestizo, and there's one that it's very known in North America that is the black and the white, which is mulatto, and I don't know if it comes from the Spanish and they adopted it in the north, but that's mulatto, and then you have sambo, which is between indigenous and black. So they had like it was kind of like a tier system of privilege, you know, in society, you know, and even the people that were born like from two European Spaniards, they would not have the same rights as someone that was born in Spain. They were called criollos.
Yeah, this is what I'm thinking of. Yeah.
So yeah, and these people, the criollos, were actually the people that started to get the independence. So the
Bolivar.
Yeah, Bolivar was one of them, and they basically they were the ones that got the independence for the country. So that meant that equality was not achieved immediately because it was basically white, the white Spanish people that were born in America and that had the beef with the Spanish from Spain, you know. So it was still a very centralized government in Colombia. At least it was gathered around the capital and the Andes region, you know. So historically, the more marginalized populations were in the outskirts of the periphery. Let's say in the Pacific, you had in the Caribbean coast in the north, and then the Amazons and the other places. So these parts of the country took longer to develop.
Right now we're talking about Gran Colombia as well.
Also, yes, there was at the beginning we had that's why we share a flag actually with Ecuador,
Hmm.
Venezuela, and Colombia. We have the same flag. We used to be the same country, and
With Panama as well.
with Panama too. Exactly, Panama was the last one that separated from Colombia, and basically we share a lot of culture between the. We share words. We share more than just borders. You know, with Venezuela and
Yeah.
Ecuador. And I think the main thing between these countries is that we share the same history too.
Hmm.
So I feel like when it came to the slavery, let's say, that ended not that long after the independence. You know, we didn't have to think it that long, like the United States, let's say. But definitely, there was a like an an imbalance between
Hmm.
the development of the periphery, the north, and the, the Pacific coast, the
Yeah.
Amazon, and the middle of the country.
Well, I mean, even to this day, the Pacific coast is considered to be very underdeveloped. No.
Yeah, we have a department called Choco.
Hmm.
Choco is it's traditionally more like a that's where the most amount of black Colombians
Hmm.
live, and it's been it's home to a lot of marginalized communities, communities that were not given the chance or the resources to develop properly. Same with the Caribbean coast, but the Caribbean coast had a more uses because we had the river that goes inside of Colombia, so it's like a
Hmm.
port, an entrance to Colombia for industry, for transportation. So
I mean, you have the beach as well.
and you have the beach. I mean,
That sells itself.
pretty much. And Cartagena was a very old city. You know, it's a
Hmm.
Spanish. The Spanish were there. It was fortified because it was against defending against English.
Us, yeah.
Yes, even the English pirates and all.
Twice, no? We tried twice.
Yeah, I think so.
I know they got sick one time from the what was it? What did they get sick from again?
I'm not sure about what this is.
They got it wasn't malaria.
I wouldn't be surprised because malaria is the one you always think about.
Okay, maybe it was malaria, but they got sick and they couldn't handle the disease,
Hmm.
so many of them died.
Yeah, it's they tried a lot. Also, they had I think most of the Caribbean knows about those struggle between English and Spanish because it was at the center, the islands, you know, in Dominican Republic and all of this. It was very historically Spanish controlled,
Hmm.
but the English were always trying to.
Well,
Yeah, this.
they did quite a lot in the end with a lot of the Caribbean,
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
the Commonwealth.
Yes, yes, and definitely after that, the United States followed their legacy, trying to, you know, like with the main when they blamed the main on Spain, and like there was a this ship that there was an explosion that basically sunk the ship, and there's still no they're still saying that it was Spain that sank it, but it came out later that it was a whole plot to have an excuse to invade the Cuba and
How many years
these
ago was it?
islands. It was in the 19th century,
Okay.
and yeah, they were definitely trying to take some of the influence in the Caribbean.
Well, they took in Puerto Rico.
They took Puerto Rico, and yeah, they were pretty bad there too.
Yeah.
They there was something that I learned that not that long ago is that in Puerto Rico there was mass sterilizing campaigns for women. Like they sterilize women without telling them. Sometimes telling, sometimes forced. Um, but yeah, it's always been like a historically disputed by more than one
Yeah.
country because the Caribbean, you know, have the Dutch people too. They had the French, you know, you have Martinique, Guadeloupe, and all of these French islands that are still part of France,
Mm-hmm.
that French
Guadalupe.
territories. Yeah. So I guess the Caribbean shares that culture, and
Mm-hmm.
I believe that, like Dominican Republic, Cuba, and all. Like I talk to people from there, and I'm like, I mean, your roommate is one of them. Like,
Yeah.
who is a Cuban guy, and you talk to them, and I'm like, man, we speak just in a different cadence, but it's almost the same words, you know. So it's very fun to talk to people from the Caribbean as well. Man, there's a lot of story in that part of Latin America.
There's a lot of it's a lot of sad story.
Yeah.
But at the same time, so much beautiful culture has come from it, you know.
Mm.
So no, I was thinking about this. Is like really so much has come from the Caribbean. Like so many important things about culture, music, dance have come from the Caribbean. Have come from these fights, the struggles.
Yeah, I can relate to it in Barranquilla with the Carnaval, because the Carnaval is a party that celebrates the merge, or the combination of three cultures:
Yeah.
the Spanish culture, the African culture, and the traditional indigenous cultures of Latin America. So you have, let's say, some reference to the Bible. You have like people dressed as devils, you know, like as the devil. You have like this kind of like imagery from Christianity, and some of these also some instruments that came from Spain, and you also have a lot of drums, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
You have like in the Caribbean, they're obsessed with the African music.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know, but we also, like, to this day we still play some music from Africa that we gave it a name. It's called champeta, but it's a very specific music from the 80s and the 90s that was African, but people just liked it in Colombia, and that we took that as an example to create our own genre, and we did music with that too.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go to a carnival and you hear the folk music, the traditional carnival music, you have everything. Like, you have the flutes that are very very from the Native Americans, from the Andes region, and from also from the Caribbean coast. You have the different types of drums. That's more of an African influence, and you have even the costumes that they use during the carnival is a mixture of all of them, of the Spanish, the indigenous people, and I feel like that same legacy is carried in all of the Caribbean as well.
Mm-hmm.
The Europeans, actually, the first land that they discovered in America was not the mainland. It was actually I think it was don't take my word for it, but I think it was the Española, the island that is Haiti and and Dominican Republic.
It's called Española. Like,
It's called La Española. It was called Hispaniola, and I feel like that's where they arrived at the first time. Maybe they arrived on a smaller island.
Wasn't it Cuba?
Could be.
Maybe a first island. I don't know.
Me neither. But I know that it was in the Caribbean, and they stayed there for like the first expeditions were around these places before they discovered the proper continent, the landmass. Yeah.
Very interesting. Thank you for the bit of history.
Yeah. I'm going back to school. Like, this is all things that I took for granted in school, and then I relearned later on in life.
No, I think it's good. I think it's important to inform, because like when I arrived, that's another thing. When I arrived to South America, zero idea about anything. Like, I had, I have Argentinian friends and I have Chilean friends. I'd met some people from Peru and Colombia before, but I didn't know anything. You don't know until you go there. And then when I went there and I found out, like, this happened, oh, the Brits tried to invade many times in different places. Like, we don't hear anything about that. We don't learn anything about colonization from, even about Australia and the US, let alone in a continent that we didn't manage to actually conquer,
That's a good question. I've never thought about that, but what do they teach you when it comes to history in school in the UK?
Well, I took history. I had it into year 9, so like when I was 14, and we learned about the Egyptians, the Romans, the Greeks. So very European, and then like the World Wars, and that's about it. That's all you learn about, and unless you want to take it as a subject, then you learn it's very Eurocentric history. You don't learn about anything that happened anywhere else in the world, and that's really crazy because we did so much damage all over the world. Well, I understand that we also brought a lot of things to the world. I know it's not all bad, but we did a lot of damage with colonization, and the fact that that's not talked about at all. That's really crazy. Like you're just pretending it didn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point that I feel like I've heard a lot from people that are countries that were ex-colonies, and I feel like something I discovered in Montreal speaking to people from Morocco, from Haiti, from the north of Africa, is that all of the ex-colonies from France really hate France.
Yeah.
It's impossible to not have to find a person that doesn't have the animosity towards the French, because I didn't know much about the history of these countries. I know this history of the Spanish colonization because we do go over that. No, I wouldn't say not enough into depth. We try to focus it. The history is more focused on when you're a kid. You learn the arrival of the Spanish people and also the pre-Columbian, the cultures before the arrival of Christopher Columbus.
And just quickly, how is it presented?
That's the thing, because I was so small.
Yeah.
I don't remember that much how it was presented. I know that they definitely told us about I remember very clearly that they told us about the mines, about the forced labor, and it was always done by the black and indigenous populations. So we know that they also said, I remember this was in primary school, I remember that they told us that they used to use the black people in the mines because they were physically stronger for that kind of hard labor, and the indigenous were more for agriculture and this kind of stuff. So they do it very matter-of-factly, like just this is what it was. You don't really think about the morality of everything, you know. But it does stays on your mind the fact that that was a bit messed up, you know. And then you explore it later on in life, but some people don't, some people do. But yeah, I started to learn a bit of the colonization story of other European countries, and I learned also that we focus a lot on the colonization of France and England and
you got taught that in school?
Huh?
You got taught that in
No, we're just our like Spanish.
Okay.
Something that I really wanted to learn was world history also. Yeah. I wanted to learn about the Romans and about like China, let's say, like because I remember I read somewhere as a kid that they invented powder. And I was like, oh, that's super interesting. I didn't know that, and I wanted to learn more, but it was all about Colombian history and around the same place. And at some point I was bored about history because I really wanted to explore more other places, you know, but it was like 11 years of just learning about this part of the world. And I feel like everyone goes through that, like your country feels to you like the least interesting country in the world. Like you want to learn is other place.
Yeah, but did you learn about the rest of Latin America as well?
Yeah, some, but it was mostly the independence wars, you know, that were fought, like because I guess for the Spanish speaking world, the Colombia and Venezuela and this part of South America was an epicenter for independence for a lot of other countries from South America later. So we got independence with Venezuela and parts of Ecuador. Then they wanted to go do that in Peru, in Bolivia, and
Yeah.
what would be these countries.
You know I imagine you know about Bolivar was like the first president of Bolivia, but he never. I don't think he ever went to Bolivia, no. Or he never served as the president, but they made him the first president, something like that.
I'm just learning about that. I wouldn't be surprised if that's part of the story, because he did went to the south. He helped liberate uh, a lot of territories down south, and some people say that the Great Colombia fall apart because he was not there to form a strong government. You know,
Yeah.
there was a lot of disagreement inside of the territories, and they ended up just splitting with time. Bolivar died not so long after the independence of our country, so then it could not stay together.
Mm.
Yeah.
And what are your thoughts on Bolivar? Because I understand to some people maybe he's more controversial. Maybe some people, well, a lot of people see him as a hero.
Mhm.
Obviously, he wasn't a perfect person, but like, what is your opinion of him?
I think he is. I think I try to see history with not with the 21st century lens, you know, because I know
Yeah.
that all of them were by modern standards not good people,
Mm-hmm.
you know, so they would have controversial opinions that would not be positive nowadays. But I see the guy as a person that was the force that made something happen that had to happen, which was the independence of the
Yeah.
countries from Spain, or from colonial control. And also he had a vision this is why I feel like he's respected a lot in Latin America. It's because he has the vision to unite the South America, or that region of the Americas, because he saw in the United States like
Mm-hmm.
a competitor, or also like a threat. You know, he said like we have to stand together because the U.S. He was a very educated person too.
Yeah.
He knew what was going on around the world, and he knew that they have a lot of space, a lot of power, and they knew what the English, or let's say the heritage of the English taken. It was like a heritage that they passed on to the United States with the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah.
They helped industrialize the country in the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
and then they just left that knowledge there, and then they got independence, and the
Yeah.
United States got like a great advantage. Spanish just left us with no gold and no resources. You know?
Yeah,
They
yeah.
took as much as they could from us, and then not that much development.
But in the end, he kind of ended up doing the opposite thing that he dreamed of, that he wanted. No, because the continent now lies. I understand it. A lot of time has passed, and many things have happened, and obviously that was well beyond his control.
Mm.
But the continent is now very divided.
Yeah, I feel like. Well, I mean, I feel like there's a lot of forces that went into play for these kinds of stuff to happen, and I feel like with these countries, like I always think of countries in the Middle East, in Africa, in South America, as very young countries. You know, they don't know any better when they started getting independence. It's not like they had the centuries of history that Europe has when it comes to civilization and how to build um, a nation, let's say. So when it comes to countries like in South America, there was a lot of vacuum with power. They had a lot of disagreements when who gets what. It's very hard to measure like what could have been done um, better. For instance, it would have been really good if we had stayed the Great Colombia, and we had Panama, we had the canal and all that. But we did
Imagine.
imagine it would be like
Yep, there is one of the most powerful countries in the world now.
probably, and that's crazy because it would be the most powerful country in the world in the equator.
Yeah.
It would be like a first world country with the perfect weather. That would be. We would have to close borders because we cannot take everyone. But yeah, but we did not have the vision. We did not have even the resources to build a canal. Let's say, and it was very hard to develop. Like, if you know the history of Haiti, that was the first country that won their independence in the Americas, even before than the United States. And what happened afterwards was the all the powers around Haiti that were not, I mean, they were the ones that were Europeans, tried their best to not let that country flourish.
Yeah.
They inherited a debt, like they put a debt on Haiti by France because they got
The cost of
independence.
independence, yeah.
Yeah, and now you have to pay for us the damages that
Yeah.
basically, and they did pay that, and
They still are paying.
there's yes, it's what has what made sure that the country never properly developed, and also, and it was the United States had a big embargo with it in Haiti. They wanted to interfere in trading as much as they could because they saw it as because it was not just the independence of a nation in the Americas. It was specifically the liberation of the abolition of slavery, the forceful abolition of slavery. They basically killed as many white Europeans as they could during the independence.
Really?
And yes, and it was a very violent independence, and they basically also participated in so many of the independence wars in Colombia. They helped a lot. Like there was a very important general in the navy of Haiti that is in the history books. I remember reading a lot about this guy. I don't remember his name, but he was from Haiti, and he provided a lot of naval support for during the independence wars in Colombia. And yeah, it was not they didn't let the country develop. They kept it poor, and I mean it's a very long history, very tragic history up to this day with Haiti. And in the case of Colombia, in the case of Panama, of all of these countries, they never had the resources, the know-how of how to build a proper nation. They didn't even had the vision, the people that came after Bolivar, of we have to be kept together and strong. I don't blame Panama, for instance, for having separated from Colombia because they were not being treated well. They were being treated very unfairly in Colombia with the central government in Colombia. And imagine if just inside of our own country, the Pacific coast and the Caribbean coast had all these marginalized communities that were not given enough resources by the central government in Bogota. Imagine how we were treating Panama, or even like more like a more far away territory. It was not the best, and I think any person from Panama will tell you that we're happy that we're not together.
Okay, so here's a question for you then. Why do you think there's so much big and evident corruption in South America when the people come from such a warm culture? Like, because it does have the resources at the end. It's a very rich and beautiful continent in all the forms, and especially in culture. But why have such a small group of people managed to, take advantage and destroy the futures for a lot of people and the idea that there could be a united continent?
I think what I was saying about Africa and Asia and South America, we have something in common, and it's that we have the repercussion of colonization, and I feel like this word has taken new names like imperialism and also neo-colonialism, and it never really ended properly. because what happens is that usually this is what I've seen is seems to be the trend is that there's a lot of companies, especially in the 20th century, because I feel like the corruption or the corruption in Latin America never really or became just a staple because of the basically the constant political instability of the countries, and that was in part definitely the United States had a lot to do with that.
Operation Condor, no?
Yes, that was a big thing. Operation Condor was.
Sorry, this was something that I had no idea about before I went to South America. Like zero idea that the CIA just went and put in dictators all over the continent.
It was crazy, and that's something that people really need to know. There's a really good book that if anyone is interested in knowing more about the history of Latin America, it's a book called The Open Veins of Latin America by Eduardo Galeano, and it delves into all of the history of why Latin America has the political instability that it has, and touches upon all of these movements that were started by the people. And if you usually when you hear about the problems in Latin America, they stem from two things: from the rise of socialist and or communist movements, because one thing that socialism and communism have, we don't have to get too deep into the nature of the economics or whatever, but they do have the emphasis on equality, like proper equality. And you will see that all of these movements that became like socialist communist movements, like the ANC in South Africa with Nelson Mandela, and socialist movements in Latin America.
Burkina Faso.
Yes, like Burkina Faso. All of these had one very similar, like in Iran, there was also in the 50s a socialist leader that they also helped overthrow.
Gaddafi as well.
Yes, there's I think there's examples everywhere with the United States in the 20th century, but just to stay in Latin America, basically they had the particular nature of always trying to get rid of the imperialism that was permeating the culture, where these companies from the United States, I have a perfect example, which is the United Fruit Company. It's called Chiquita, which I have an open boycott against them. Like, I don't buy their bananas because they have too much blood on them.
Okay.
But this company, it's crazy how much power they exerted over the government and governments in Latin America. Very famously, they convinced the government of the United States to help over, and with their help, they overthrew the government in Guatemala, and they overthrew a democratically elected president and put a dictator on top of it. They did the same in Nicaragua with Somoza. They did Chile with Pinochet. Like Salvador Allende was a socialist government, a socialist president. As he was democratically elected, and the CIA said no, we can't have that, and they did that all around. In Argentina they did it too.
Never in Colombia.
In Colombia they didn't.
They didn't need to.
Not really, because Colombia was also always subservient to the United States. You know, there we had a very historical event that was called La Masacre de las Bananeras, which is like the banana companies massacre, basically in Spanish, and it was so famous in Colombia that even, I don't know if you've ever heard of or read 100 Years of Solitude.
I have the book over there. I haven't gone through it now.
It's fine. It's a very complex book. Even in Spanish, it's hard for me to read it because it has so many words that I don't even know. But it's a very interesting story, and it's a fictional story, but they touch upon the massacre. Part of my family is actually from the place where it took place.
Okay.
It's called Ciénaga Magdalena, like the next to Barranquilla, to the department where Barranquilla is located. And it was again by the United Fruit Company. They had the workers there on a like on the worst conditions that you could imagine. There was like a 4x4 room where there were like 20 people sleeping, like on hammocks and on the floor, and it was crazy. They were not paid well. They were buying land from Colombia,
Yeah.
and at nothing, like not even. They were just helping. They were with influence, bribes. They would buy land or requisition also land from let's say from peasants or people that had land there,
Yeah.
but it was not productive. You know, if it wasn't not productive, then it could be requisition for, oh no, don't worry, we have the money and the resources to actually make something with this land, and they would force them to sell the land with the help sometimes of the Colombian government. So that culminated in a strike, a very long strike that took a lot of time and support from small companies from the Caribbean, from Barranquilla, from Santa Marta especially from Santa Marta, one of the cities there. And but the longer it got, the less support they were getting, because no one wanted to keep paying for it. Like, are you gonna actually accomplish something with this? But that's how they always beat these movements, is that they outspend them because they don't have the resources.
Yeah.
And but in the end they were too persistent. So the United Fruits Company, along with the United States government, they said and pressured the central government in Colombia, and said like, hey, there's this strike that is ruining our business here, so we need you to quell this whole strike, this whole revolt that is going on. And basically the Colombian army, pressured by the United States and the United Fruits Company, went there and massacred like around 2,000 people. Yes, because they would not leave the plaza in where they were protesting. They were doing like just staying there. And it was crazy because it was Colombian people, the same called the Colombian army, and they were said, you have to leave or we'll start shooting, and they stayed, according to some accounts, because they felt like they're not gonna shoot all of us, like, you know.
Yeah.
It's crazy, and they did, and it was like something that had an extremely high ripple effect on society, especially on that part of the country. And these kind of scars that Latin America bears is what the book talks about. Every country has these kinds of stories. In Chile, with the dictatorship, when they were disappearing people, they were, yes. There was I think every country in Latin America has their own story. If you talk to a Chilean person, they will tell you like a banana massacre of their own, not necessarily with the United Fruits Company, but definitely sometimes with the United States government. You know, there was this the disappearance and the murder of dissidents and socialist leaders and union leaders.
Not even as extreme as that, artists as well. Artists, just people who wanted to express.
Oh yeah, man! What was the name of this guy in Chile? I believe he was that. He was a singer. I remember he played the guitar, and they rounded up a bunch of people that were suspected of being communists, and that guy did call himself a communist, because apparently that's a very huge scene in the 20th century. So they were rounded up in a football stadium. This was a very famous thing in Chile. I don't know much about it, but that guy was tortured and shot in the end. And he wrote a song. And he wrote a song while he was in prison there, or being held there. And they passed it out, and it made it out of the stadium, and they recorded like a thing for that, you know. But it was extremely sad, his story. Like, he was just doing peaceful protest and assembling people, and they just took them all, and then kill them.
It's heavy. It's intense.
Yeah.
Do you see a future for Latin America? Do you see a possibility of a united Latin America?
I think so.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely have high hopes, especially now that the North, Europe and North America, well, specifically the United States, seems to be so unstable constantly. Like they're involved in wars, and they're constantly at odds with certain countries. Like we still have let's say France. France still has the control over West Africa through their currency, to the bank
Mm-hmm.
in France, with the francs in West Africa, these kinds of stuff, and you're seeing more and more these kinds of detachment from the
Yeah.
ex-colonial powers.
But on the other hand, then you have people like Javier Milei, who's in power, and he wants to suck up to those Western powers. And then you have Maduro, who
Yeah.
wants to go against everyone and doesn't want to cooperate with anyone. So I think you have counteracting forces. I think that's the problem. The politics are just so divided.
I agree, and it's hard because I don't want. It's not that we should blame specifically the outside forces, because they do play a role there.
Mhm.
It's extremely big role, because all of these things happen because these leaders during the 20th century tried to nationalize their resources. What was wrong about that? They want to make sure that, let's say in Ecuador, the oil that they have to be from the Ecuadorian people, for the
Mhm.
Ecuadorian country. But they had Chevron there. It was a whole other story where they caused one of the worst spills. They're still in the Amazon. There's still the oil there. A lot of communities, indigenous communities, died because of that. They still have an open case in court. Well, they successfully sued and won the case with Chevron, but they just left Ecuador, took all of their assets, and now they're trying to find a country where they can uh, uh, force, I don't know how to say it in English, but make sure they pay what the court says. It's like $9 billion, and don't want that, because that's basically creates a precedent. Where other places where
Accountability.
Exactly, and they don't want that. So it's not just the outside forces that do play a big role in why Latin America is the way it is right now, but also there's corruption by our own leaders. There's a lot of insecurity in our, let's say in everyday life. There's crime. Yeah, that is something that we do have to get in order. We have the same problems that the United States have with lobbying. We have a name in Spanish, it's called clientelismo, and it's basically companies or private people or institutions buying influence in politics. And of course you can imagine that in Latin America is very strong. They have a stronghold also on popular opinion. But
The crazy thing for me is that when I found out that lobbying is actually legal in it, like people have that as a career in the United States.
United States, yeah, that's crazy. I mean, you kind of get into the American politics because it's just so comical and entertaining sometimes, in a very very bad way.
Like, I mean, we have it too, but we have it in like donations, and these the parties get given a fucking £10 million donation, or even £100,000 in the case of Liz Truss. But people don't have that as a job title, It's done more like discreetly.
Yeah, I mean, like the super PACs, the whole way it works, and how people get into their seats in Congress is like, how do you have a democracy? You don't have a democracy. You basically do not have a democracy.
Do you think that democracy exists?
In its purest sense, no. For many reasons. Let's say in the United States, I don't feel like there's really a democracy, because they have it's not the popular vote that wins it. It's the electoral college and this kind of unfair representation of certain.
It's the same for us.
In the UK?
Yeah. We don't
Yeah.
have proportional representation. We have first past the post is called.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's also similar in Canada as well. I know my friends in Ontario have said that most of the people in Ontario, like in numbers, they're more liberal than conservative. But somehow the provincial government always ends up being conservative.
Yeah.
You know, and in Colombia we have the same influence with the companies and sometimes even illegal criminal groups. You know, they also have their say in regional politics and stuff like that. So it's a long way to go. You know, I feel like we are also very polarized in Colombia. We also have to try to figure out what the real step is. I feel like in Colombia the first thing we have to tackle is corruption, because corruption is so palpable, like in everyday life. Like you have this bribe culture and this intimidation culture too, because if you are like a very local representative, you try to do a good thing as a social leader, you know, you get death threats and they can actually kill you. And if they want to take you out, it's not really that hard. Like you, no, we never know who gives the order, but honestly, you could just talk to a criminal organization, you pay them some money, and they can take out someone that is being problematic for you. So this thing has to end.
Yeah.
Like it's you cannot form a government like that, or at least a proper representation of the interests of the people like that.
I guess the good question is, where do you start with something like that, though?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that all of these elections, like the election that we just had in Canada, the election in the United States, I feel like what they've shown us is that we cannot look at politics just during election season. You know, we cannot just wait 4 years to say, okay, this guy was elected, my guy was elected, so we can just rest because everything's gonna be okay. No, because in the U.S., both parties suck really bad, and they're both guilty of the same kinds of problems. You know, especially I feel like the worst part about American politics is their foreign intervention, foreign policies, and both parties are the parties of the status
Same
quo.
shit, yeah.
Yes, so you have to, okay, if you feel like you voted for the one that is the least of two evils, then you have to keep them in check. You have to still see that they're doing the beat of the people, or what is best for the people.
Yeah, and I think that's where people normally check out. Like, you know, we got the lesser two evils in power, so they have to do their job now. And it's like, well, if we just let them be, then they can be as bad as the other ones. You know, I think the accountability is the big problem. Like, we have to hold them accountable at the end of the day. If we just roll over and let them do whatever they want, then the problems come from there, you know? I think that's something that I really like about the EU. Obviously, it's not a perfect system, it's not a perfect place, but there is naturally going to be more accountability when you are a group of 28 nations together and you have to make decisions together. Of course, there are problems with that as well, with like all the vetoes and stuff. But when you are working together, you have to find more solutions that work for the majority rather than the minority, you know. So, but that also relies on us saying like, this is not okay. Like, you can't keep doing this. You have to change. We're not gonna stand for this.
Absolutely. Well, I wanted to ask you about because we had an election here in Canada very recently, and I wanted to know, because you had your own problems in the UK. You've had the famous cases of having like prime minister after prime minister in a very short amount of time. And what was this? I feel like there was this lady who
This stress.
The one that lasted like I think it was like
lettuce.
a lettuce or something like it was a cabbage or something like
Yeah,
that lasted longer than
yeah, yeah.
than she did on power.
But she was a disastrous politician, you know, and she did so much damage to the country in a 6 week span. She, I mean, the biggest thing that she did was it was when we were going through the really bad energy crisis, and the prices were going through the roof. I wasn't there, so but I was not. Was I there? No, I think I was still in Australia. Um, but what she did was she subsidized the prices.
Okay.
So you're taking the taxpayer money. So you're taking the future money. You're putting the taxpayers in debt more. To pay the energy companies, and it doesn't make any sense to me how they can get away with that and how people will just let that happen. It's like, no, you're still paying the price. In fact, you're paying more because you don't borrow money for free. You have to pay for the interest, you know? Just because you're not paying it right now doesn't mean that you're not going to be paying it. This money could go to better things. Why aren't we putting a price cap on the energy companies saying, you can't charge more than this price, you know?
The energy companies are private.
Private,
right?
yeah.
Okay.
I think there are some, like I think maybe British Gas I think is a mix of private and public, but you know, we sold off so much of our public system with Margaret Thatcher in the 80s and 90s and the 2000s and the 2010s
Yeah, I
and the
mean,
2020s.
yeah, it was a lot of well, austerity was the key word for for them, and it's sad because I only have a person that I talk to in England, other than you that I know from England that I actually talk to, and they tell me about the NHS and what's happened to the NHS in the last decade. I'd say it's crazy because they put an example of how it was before, not perfect, but it was a functioning system. But now, my friend has issues with the thyroids. So that you get the feeling with the times and the stuff that she spends going through these kinds of stuff, that she feels like this is going to develop into something worse, and I feel like I could do something to avoid it, and I can't.
Yeah.
So I kind of feel her frustration.
No, I mean, this is the way that it works at the end of the day. They take away resources, they strip the budget down, so you have less availability and access to services. And then what happens? Oh, but there's you can go and pay for it. They start recommending going to a private doctor just to go and do small things here and there, and then it's bigger things here and there, and then it's like, well, you're gonna have to wait 12 months, maybe 2 years if you need this emergency surgery done. It's like, well, this is how you strip away. This is what they've been doing. This is what the Conservatives were doing in the UK. They stripped away the system. They sold off so much of our public service, and now it's privatization. They say like 1/3 of the NHS has been privatized since the Conservatives went into power. Something crazy like that.
I know it hasn't been too long, but how's the Labour government doing?
Well, I haven't been there, so I don't know. It's been nearly a year now, and I think maybe they've done some things slightly better, but at the same time they're still a centre right party. You know, they're still the Tories were over here, the centre's here, and they may be here. You know, it's a little bit better, but they're still not, you know, doing the things they need to. They're still not taxing the rich. They're still not funding public services. They're still not actually dealing with the problems.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people were talking about the Canadian election here, and I felt like they were focusing maybe too much with the United States because it's our neighbor, and But I feel like the UK, it's a better comparison, contrast for with what Canada could look like with a conservative government. Is this axe the tax thing, where they're giving breaks to big corporations, uh, to the oil companies,
Mm-hmm.
the the ones that basically benefit from it. I remember the housing problem is a big thing in Canada right now. And
Shouldn't be.
it shouldn't
It
be.
should not be. They have a shit ton of space.
Exactly, and they have a lot of they had the plans laid out, and I
Yeah.
remember I reading about it. I don't know why, because I can't vote yet, but I wanted to know what was going on, and the conservative plan was so bad that it was crazy. It was basically giving like a GST, like the a tax break for people that were buying a house, but it was not. It was not. Let's put it this way, because I cannot find the word. If you want to buy a $500,000 house, you will get a break, a tax break
Mm-hmm.
based on that amount, which would be, let's say, depending on what the percentage was, you would get like a $30,000
Mm-hmm.
break, you know. But the person that wants to buy like a property that is $4 million, they will get, with the same percentage, they will get a much higher tax break.
Yeah.
So you, as a regular everyday person, you're not gonna get like that much of a break. Yes, you will get a break, but that's not gonna help you that much. The people that are really going to exploit this, it's gonna be the big real estate development companies. That kind of like a BlackRock in the United States.
Yeah, yeah.
They're just gonna start. Oh, it's easy because now we get these big breaks. Our output is has just increased.
I can give you almost specific relations to that in the UK. I remember seeing a video recently. It was like they were scrapping the stamp duty after your they you had to pay stamp duty, which is our house tax thing, for a second home or any additional homes. Or maybe you could do it on two. You had two free, and then after you had to pay. You know what the exception was? It was something like, unless you were buying 7 properties.
Unless you buy 7 properties.
I think you don't have to pay on a single one, something like that. So it's like for, I mean, it is good. Someone who's buying 2, 3, 4 properties should be paying this tax, but then someone who's buying 7 properties all of a sudden is exempt. You know, someone who clearly has the resources to be paying this extra money, and the people who have the money to pay should be paying. That is how it should be. And the other one that we have was our national insurance. So it's like our other part of the income tax. This is the one that most people pay. Like income tax has this tax-free threshold of like £12,000. The national insurance, it comes in a lot lower, but it's a fixed rate. So it's something like above every £250 a week. The rate was 10%, and then it got dropped down to 8%. But it's a fixed rate. So you think someone who's earning 100 grand a year, well, a better example is, I don't know, someone earning 20 grand a year is paying like £1,600. So they get a £400 tax relief basically. And then someone who's earning 100 grand a year, they would be paying 20 grand, 10 grand, but they're now paying 8 grand, so they get a 2 grand relief basically. So these fixed tax.
Yeah, because that's the thing exactly, that income tax is one of these like the only progressive tax that most countries seem to agree, like, okay, yeah, that's good, but we have to implement more of these kinds of proportionate taxing. And I feel like when it comes to housing, and I think every other problem, the problem is that a lot of these parties, or what these politicians prefer to do is they become just like a one trick pony, where it's like they just got taxes, let's just got taxes, that's it. But if we take the housing problem, it's more complex than that. It's also, it has, there's a lot of bureaucracy when it comes to the permits and the amount of let's say barriers that you have for building. And also they are faced with a big challenge, which is right now the market in Canada is crazy. Like a house, like a shed in the middle of the countryside costs like $1 million. In Canada is going really down the deep end. And the thing there is that if you manage to reduce the value of houses, let's say with social housing, I think social housing is like a great example of how you could do that. In Colombia we did that, and it was a very good program at the beginning. Now it has some problems, but social housing always helps with that. Maybe less bureaucracy when it comes to buying getting building permits, but also you have this challenge where a lot of people that have invested in real estate and in houses, like have a house as an investment. Yeah, it goes against their interest, or against the people's interest, to have them reduce the money of in the market of houses in real estate. So the government also has this challenge, like how do we do this without affecting the people that have invested so much in their houses, not the people that have like 10 properties, but the ones that have just one property, and they're like counting on that property for investment, for their future, for retirement, if they decide to sell it and you know, make something out of that. So now they have these two options, like, okay, so do we do everything we can to lower the prices of houses, but then we're screwing some people over with this, and if it keeps going high, then there's no future.
And do you see a solution to this problem?
I mean, I'm not an expert. I'm just tired of simple solutions and simple slogans and simple thinking to complex problems. You know, and I feel like the bar is so low that any politician can just finger wag or point the finger at blame. Just shift the blame to somewhere and say, I'll do better. But in reality, they're not going to do anything different. So that's what's been so frustrating about these past election cycles, that make me kind of wish that I don't pay attention at all. But
that's the whole like ignorance is bliss thing, and it's true and it's not, because at the same time we are responsible at the end of the day. Like I understand there's a lot of things that are out of our control, but I think it is easy to point the fingers at like the corporations and the richest people who shouldn't be where they are, but they do also rely on our consumption at the end of the day. So it is kind of a catch-22, because you know they shouldn't be where they are, and they've got to where they are because we let them get to where they are. But at the same time, so much of our consumption is so heavily ingrained, like their resources, their companies are so ingrained in our lives, that it is really difficult to separate from that and to stop consuming their goods and giving them more resources, you know.
I feel like there's also a problem with people, that most people are not really very engaged in politics, and when you're not really engaged when you don't really engage in politics, you become what they call a single issue voter. It's just one thing can sway your vote, like immigration, something
the
like
number
that.
one politics seller right now.
Yeah, exactly, it's the hot issue right now, and that comes to the detriment of your own material conditions of your future, the future of your kids too, because I mean I think of a conversation that I had with a woman that was what they call a TERF. It's a trans exclusionary radical feminist.
Okay.
And she was a feminist, but she was exclusionary to trans people. The trans issue she was really against, you know. So it was so important to her. We had a long conversation about that. She had an interesting perspective. It was complex, but I understand where she came from. But the issue that I saw with her way of thinking is that she said that was the most important issue for her. And I asked her, like, what about the economic prospect, or let's say climate change, because there's a lot of denialism and no, let's just keep taking resources. It doesn't matter. Deregulate. Let's not keep an eye on what we're doing, what we're burning, what we're consuming. And what if you put if you see the political landscape right now, the people that agree with her, like, yeah, this trans issues is like a waste of time, it's like crazy, these people are mentally sick, that's how she saw trans people. These people are usually on the right. Yes, and these people are very anti climate change action, anti the sustainable development, anti all of these kinds of stuff. And this is the craziest part. Also, they were usually anti-abortion too, and she was a feminist, and she was also a defender of pro-choice, and pro-choice, and she also cared about it. She was not a climate change denial. And
how did she find herself in this?
I have no idea, but I wanted to understand. I asked her, like, if you know that, would you still vote for the right wing candidate, knowing that there's the other issues that you also care about go against that? And she said yes. She said that she would still vote because she feels like the trans issue is too much. And these little wedge issues that politicians use to get these kinds of votes, like the immigration is a big one, where I have family members that voted for Trump, being in the United States against their own
interests.
You
have family members?
Yeah, that voted for Trump, and in other situation, in another time, because there was a time where they did not have documentation. They went there legally. They had the documentation, but at some point they couldn't hold it. But they wanted to stay.
Which is the case for a large majority of immigrants.
Yes, a lot of people, and they could not. They just had to stay undocumented for a long time until they finally found a way into citizenship. And I wonder if it ever came to their minds that if Trump implemented all the things that he's doing now, or at least just the rhetoric that he was, maybe he didn't have to do it, but just the fact that he was proposing it, and you're voting for that, you are basically, if you were in the situation that you were 5 years ago where you were still undocumented, you would be deported. So how do you reconcile those two things?
Well, going a step further, he was even talking about people who obtained it illegally, or had a stay, an illegal kind of stay. They could also be revoked their citizenship.
Yeah.
So they could be in a situation where they could be stripped of their rights. And
definitely. And you have the case in the United States of Mahmoud Khalil, the guy that was protesting. I was a protester, a pro-Palestine protester, and he was actually he had a green card. That's the closest you can be to a full citizen. Like the next step is just being a citizen. So, and they took him away. They said, no, you're going to El Salvador.
Freedom of speech.
Freedom of speech. That's the party of freedom of speech. And it was crazy. So it's so challenging because I feel like some people both against their best interests. Some people both, even when there's contradiction in their own thinking. And how do you navigate those stuff? And I feel like you have to get people more engaged in politics and in a healthy way. And I feel that that's the hardest thing to do, because some people, understandably, they don't have the time or the stomach for these kinds of conversations and looking at what's happening in the world. I mean, some people get frustrated. I get a kick out of it. I like reading about stuff. I like being informed. I like, if I get mad, if I get happy, I like to have that reaction.
No, I think it was really refreshing. Like when we sat down and had that conversation in Mundolingo, like it's been a while since I've had a conversation with someone who's like really on the same page, you know? Because I think there are a lot of people who have just kind of tuned out at this point. Like they're just so done with it. Some people who don't want to try and understand what's going on. Some people who don't understand that politics affects us and affects everyone in our day-to-day lives. And there is some people, who just refuse to talk about it. And it's scary. I think that's really scary. Obviously, I do understand it's very intense. I think it can be very depressing talking about it all the time, knowing that this is our reality. But if we just stop talking about it, then we just let them win, you know? And that's not okay. Like you say, for us and for the generations to be, that's not okay. Things are, they're not looking too good right now, and they're only gonna get worse if we just let them do what they want, you know? But I think something that really goes against us is the fact that most of the media is owned by the right, and any time there's a really progressive figure who comes up, the specific examples of Bernie Sanders and Jeremy Corbyn, like people who really wanted to do progressive things for the US and for the UK, they got ruined, they got eaten alive by the media, because the media, obviously the money comes from the right, and if these people get into power, they're potentially jeopardizing their position if they really manage to do the things that they want to do.
Yeah, it's I always think about this book called Manufacturing Consent. It was by Noam Chomsky, and it's how all media. Let's say he was talking specifically about the United States, but this is the same for most countries, where to have this kind of you have a system where, like, let's call it mainstream media, where you basically curate what is the acceptable position, and it's shown to the masses, and they say like, okay, this is what I should be thinking. That was a traditional way of thinking for a very long time, where you just watch CNN or you watch like the major cable news, and they all had a very similar opinion. Like, for instance, if you have a very contentious issue like the Israel-Palestine conflict, a lot of people, they don't have the time, or they don't have the wish or the engagement to get into the whole nuance of the conversation. So they go to the headlines, to what they say in these outlets, and then you get an opinion out of that, you know. And it's massaged. It's very like, oh no, people were not killed, they died, you know, like the words. This is what Chomsky speaks about on the book, and it's very poignant. But now you have, which is this is what is more concerning to me, is the this alternative, like, so people were seeking an alternative to these news outlets, and that's where the whole independent media kind of stuff started popping out.
Ben Shapiro.
Like, yeah, the Ben Shapiro's, the Joe Rogans, this alternative way of getting your news, and that was understandable, because people were tired of feeling like they were being fed lies.
Yeah.
But then these kinds of people became also affected by the undesirable aspects of mainstream media where
Yeah.
people were being some people were paid by corporations, by lobbying groups that, hey, why don't you talk about this, you have to think about this. And
Did you used to watch Joe Rogan?
uh, yes, it depended on a lot on the
The
on
guest.
the on the guest,
Yeah, yeah.
but I liked what like I like, for instance, one I think that was the first time like Neil deGrasse Tyson, I don't know if you know him,
Yeah.
was on the Joe Rogan podcast, and it was like a very interesting conversation. You had like a guy that was like, okay, I'm not really into science, but I'm really curious, and you basically you identify, you feel like you're in the conversation, you're basically Joe Rogan, because you are the person that is just curious and wants to know more. And it was interesting to you because it was basically a person akin to you having that conversation with an expert or someone that has like a more informed opinion. And it was very nuanced, it was very like not taking sides, you know. But then Joe and many of these other people started to take sides, like, oh no, I know better, you know.
Well, I think it was all the pandemic.
Oh my god, yes.
Just so many conspiracy theories came with them, and you know they thought that the conspiracy theory. I mean, at the end of the day, no one really knows what happened, you know. But they thought that the conspiracy theorists knew better than the scientists, and that the scientists were all conspiring against the world and stuff, and just one thing led to another, and now it's like, well, we need to send all the immigrants back to their own countries.
I mean, a lot of people suffered during the pandemic because there's an aftermath, the economic aftermath.
100%.
We're still living the economic aftermath of the pandemic, and that's the reason why last year no incumbent government that was around during the pandemic was re-elected, because like everyone is like, yeah, economy sucks, so you are to blame. But that was just a recession all over the world.
So Canada broke that basically. Canada's like the first
Yes.
country that's.
Yeah, it's because of comrade Trump that seems to be doing everything right for the rest of the people. So he's ruining America to save the rest of the world, I feel. But definitely the pandemic also had another effect. Or there's this guy that I really admire that is Carl Sagan, and he was a scientist. I think he died in the 90s, so it's been a while. But he had a very cool phrase that was called like, we live in a world extremely dependent. I'm paraphrasing, extremely dependent on science and technology, where almost no one knows anything about science and technology, and this makes a combustible combination that is ready to blow it up in our faces, you know. And that there's nothing proof that more than the pandemic, where people that didn't even know how we derive facts or how do we reach conclusions in science, people that don't know how the peer review system work, or how do we come to conclusions when it comes to medical or scientific facts. They start to just being pivoted into the conspiracy theory rabbit hole, and anyone would fall prey to that, because this the thing that is so powerful about the conspiracy theories is like they have mastered the art of like, to tell a good lie you have to sprinkle a little bit of the truth, and they always start with saying like a fact, like a medical fact about, do you know how your cells work this way, and that's true. People are like, yeah, and then along the way they're gonna start saying the crazy stuff, you know. And as if you're a person that don't engage in these kinds of stuff, you're not interested in academia, why would you, if you're just like a normal person, it's very easy to fall into these kinds of stuff. How do you counteract that? I feel like people have to really just engage more.
Listen to what you're actually listening to.
Yes, yeah, and be skeptical in a healthy way. Like, okay, yeah, I distrust the government, but I'm not gonna trust this random idiot that is telling me this stuff. Like, if I don't trust the experts or the people that have all these like background on this stuff, then why would I trust the plumber with a podcast? Like it makes no sense, you know. And so a healthy dose of skepticism with good faith, and like not a hothead. Like I know you're mad about, okay, they're making you take a vaccine, or the economy's taking a downturn, you cannot pay things anymore, but you always have to have a commitment to the truth, like no biases, try to see like, okay, what's actually going on here.
Yeah. So how do we make politics cool?
Oh, that's a very good question. I'm not sure. I feel like there's a lot of channels that are making politics a big cool, you know. I watch some that do, you know, the people that do video essays. I find them entertaining, and there's others that like to do it in a more you know, with jokes, or with, like, let's say like the Daily Show with Jon Stewart or John Oliver, these kinds of shows that they give you an insight into the news and what's going on in the world, but they put a healthy dose of comedy. And what I would find, like, I feel like it's a good recommendation with this stuff is like, first, don't just take that, because when you go to, let's say, the John Oliver, the Last Week Tonight with John Oliver show, you'll just get the surface level analysis. So never, like, if you are interested and you feel like, oh, I didn't know this, then get deeper into it. Read articles by good sources and cross-reference, you know, go to The Guardian, go to Reuters, go to, like, papers that are at least committed to have integrity, journalistic integrity, and cross-reference, see where, like, where if more than one place is saying that, and also try to stay away. I mean, because I've seen a lot of this kind of content, I feel like a good, like, a rule of thumb for this is stay away from the people that are always complaining about stuff, like negative, completely negative. Like, they're not thinking about helping people. They're not thinking about. They're just thinking about someone or some group is taking stuff away from them, or these people are doing this to fuck everyone over, and these kinds of stuff is usually, as a rule of thumb, you know that these people are not, don't have the best interest in mind. You know, they're not altruistic in any way. They're not empathetic in any way. As a rule of thumb, I feel like that's a good way to steer away from the toxic part of politics, where someone is always to blame, or you should. It's like hate aiming at someone. These two things, I think it's a good way to find, like, a good source for your information. The rest is up to you. Like, what do you like? Do you like the video essays? Do you like the more entertaining side?
Do you have any specific recommendations for people?
Well, personally, the channels that I watch on YouTube for podcasts, like, I'm wearing a shirt by one of a channel that I like. It's called Climate Town.
Okay.
So if you're interested in climate change, the stuff that are problems that you might not know about, that are, like, in your face and you don't know, it is a great channel, and the guy's super funny. They also have a podcast. It's called the Climate Change Denialist Playbook, basically, and where they debunk these kinds of claims, like, oh, if it's global warming, then why is it getting colder during the winter? This kind of stuff. So they're very funny if you're into climate, sustainable development, this kind of stuff. I like these kinds of the shows, like Jon Stewart, John Oliver. I feel like they're fun. They're easy to, if you're looking for a more digestible kind of video for complex topics. I feel like those are fun. There's a bunch that are more podcast related, or that talk about the news in a more podcast format, that I feel like they are very fact based, and
Mm-hmm.
there's a little integrity there. I like the Minority Report with Sam Cedar.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I like a guy that is Canadian and has a good channel. It's called The Rational National, and
Mm-hmm.
also one that I got into usually lately. It's called Overzealots.
Okay.
Overzealots is a very good channel. He does more of the video essay stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and he gives like sources, provide sources, and it gives a good analysis. So
I think I might have been watching this guy recently. He talks a lot about like the socialist regimes that worked, no?
yes, exactly. Some of the like myth busting, some of this
Mm-hmm.
stuff. Like the first video I saw about him is like about Che Guevara, and
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
how
yeah, yeah. I've seen this video.
he was portrayed as oh my god, he killed so many people, he killed children, he was like a murderer
There's only like one actual report of where he,
of a person that he killed,
yeah,
and
he
that
didn't
was
want to do it.
yes, and it was like understandable in the context of the revolution that was taking place
Yeah, yeah.
in Cuba at that time, and I mean it was eye opening to me because if you grow up where I grew up on my dad's side of the family, it was like oh Che Guevara was like a monster, Fidel a monster, like communism killed 100 million people, so.
Oh, the biggest myth in the book.
Yeah, the black book of communism that always they refer to that 100 million death that
And
yeah
how many is capitalism then?
yeah that they counted even Nazi deaths during World War II, like oh
As communism.
like people that were killed by communism.
Because it was the National Socialist Workers' Party.
Yeah, imagine like it was very socialistic, not fascistic at all. It was very social.
No.
It's like the Democratic Republic of North Korea, very democratic because it's in the name. So that's a very interesting channel, and this if you watch some of these channels, eventually you'll get recommended videos that might interest you from other channels.
Did you like, you seen some Jimmy the Giant and Gary's Economics as well?
I've seen like the videos recommended, but I've never actually seen a video from them.
I would check them out if I were you.
Yeah, I mean, if you can give me some recommendations like that.
Yeah, 100%. Well, we could definitely go on talking, but I feel like this is a more or less a natural end. We've been going on for a couple of hours as well, so this will be a nice long one for anyone who's listening. Shout out to my dad. So before we finish, do you have any last questions for me?
No, not really. I feel like we've communicated a lot right before the podcast and the weeks before, and I feel like I learned a lot about you. So no, not right now.
Thank you. Okay, my last three questions for you today. The question from the last guest. What is the biggest fear that you've overcome in your life?
One that I feel like I'm still trying to overcome but I'm trying to get there, is the fear of failing. It's like, it's a bit of it's like a fear of putting or challenging myself too much, because I feel like if I set a goal for myself that it's too complex or whatever, I feel like I'm afraid to fail and feel horrible or feel miserable trying to accomplish it, but feel that I'm not gonna accomplish it, and that's led me to not try stuff, not try hard enough or not push myself, and I feel like that's a big fear of me, like failing at what I set myself to do.
Yeah, interesting. What question would you like to ask the next guest?
Okay, I would say I would ask, what's a thing that you would really like to do with your life, but feel like you're not able to, you know.
Okay. And finally, what message would you like to share in your language?
In my language. Haz bien, no mires a quién. Like, do good, doesn't matter to who.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Really good, productive conversation.
Likewise. Thank you.
And thank you everyone for listening. This has been episode 30 of Backpack Systems.